In this video, we will be discussing CodeCollaborator 7.0, the latest release from SmartBear Software. CodeCollaborator is a software tool that allows companies to review, annotate, and comment on source code, images, schematics, and shared documents. This enables cross-functional teams to easily work together, regardless of their location. CodeCollaborator is a server-based application that provides a browser-based user interface. Now, the server-side piece of the tool requires a database, and CodeCollaborator supports three different databases: Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, and Oracle. CodeCollaborator also offers client-side tools, which include a GUI tool, Eclipse plugin, Visual Studio add-in, Windows Printer Driver, Command Line tool, and a P4V and P4Win plugin. Additionally, the client-side tool is responsible for integrating with version control tools. CodeCollaborator actually provides integration for 16 different SCM systems. Even if you are using a version control tool that is not directly supported, you can still get great results by using its command line utility to directly select files for a comparison in a review. We're actually going to be doing a demonstration of the tool using Subversion as our SCM. The CodeCollaborator client is pulled up in the middle of my screen, and we're going to be using the GUI to actually create the review. However, you could create this review using the command line utility. The CodeCollaborator client allows me to configure multiple SCMs. In this case, I only have Subversion. However, I can add additional by clicking the Add option. As an example, if I wanted to include Git as one of the SCM configurations, I could simply click Add, choose Git, and set that up as one of the repositories. This would allow me to select files from either repository and add it to a review. And this is important if I want to work on multiple projects that use different SCMs. You'll also notice three options down at the bottom: Add Changes, Add Revisions, and Add Subversion Diffs. These are unique to the Subversion SCM system. Other SCMs would have different labels within these buttons. Now, these individual buttons determine whether I'm going to be doing a pre or a post-commit style review. You can choose a pre or post-commit style review on the fly. There's no special configuration that has to happen on the server side to set this up. We would simply choose one of the options to determine whether we were doing a pre or post-commit review. In this case, we'll be doing a pre-commit review, and we'll use Add Changes. When we click on Add Changes, we're able to create a new review. We'll give it a name. We'll click Next. Notice that the files are automatically selected within my workspace. We'll click Next again. Here we can add supporting documentation. So if I wanted to add a checklist or a requirements document to this review, I could do so. And we'll actually add a file now. We'll use a PDF file for this particular review. Click Next. We can see the information that's going to be attached to our review, and then we'll click Finish. This will automatically open up the browser window. Now, there's a couple of things that were occurring in the background. First, the CodeCollaborator client is communicating to the SCM to pull the appropriate files, and additionally, it's going to be sending those files up the wire to the CodeCollaborator server. And at that point, the CodeCollaborator server will not only get those files and package them for the review, but actually create the new review at the same time. Here, we need to log in, and now we can see the reviews that we have listed out as action items within the CodeCollaborator dashboard. Here we have incoming, outgoing, and completed reviews. We can also sort these columns or check the boxes to remove and filter out the review list. The newest review that we created is a Subversion review, and notice that our progress states that we need to finish creating that review. So let's do that now. When I choose this, we can see our basic information at the top, our title, overview information. You'll also notice a product version area field here. This is a hierarchical custom field, which is a custom field that can be set up and specified within the administrative features of the tool. What this field allows me to do is choose an option from the drop-down. In this case, I only have one for the product, but the version has multiple. And when I choose one of those items, it then provides me an area to choose and pick from. So again, the product version area custom field is unique for my particular installation, but you can customize this to meet your needs. We also see our participants section here. Notice that we have an error and that we have to have at least two participants, one of which is our author and the other needs to be the reviewer. When I choose the role drop-down menu, you'll see I have an author, reviewer, and observer role. This is if you want to do an informal style review. In a more formal style review, you might also have the role of moderator as a participant in here as well. So since we have to have at least one reviewer, we'll go ahead and choose one now. We'll hit Choose Reviewer, and we'll begin to type in somebody's name. The list is automatically filtered based on what I start to key in. Now, it's important to note that I can have as many reviewers on a review as necessary to complete that review. In this case, we're just going to use one. The other role worth mentioning here is the observer role. And this is a great role if you have maybe a junior member of your team that you want to include within the review. You want them to be aware of the code that's being written and how reviews are performed, but you don't actually want them to impact the workflow of the review. And so this is where the observer role could be used. Once we've defined our participants, we'll scroll down. We can see our material information, and then we need to move on to our next steps. We have three different choices: apply, apply and annotate, and apply and begin review. Typically, the best practice states that we would choose apply and annotate. And this is basically saying that I'm going to go in, I'm going to make notes about all of the materials that I've attached to the review, including the reasons why I've made changes to the code. And this allows the reviewers and the observers that are participating in the review better understanding as to how or why the changes were made, and allows them to work through the review much more quickly. We're just going to choose apply and begin review today. Now notice that we've entered into the inspection phase, and that's indicated here within this graphical interface. As the author, there's nothing else that I need to do. I have created the review and I've sent it out to be reviewed by Justin Collier. We're actually going to open another browser to illustrate what the reviewer would see as he participates in the review. Here we can see all of the reviews listed out in our action item areas of the reviews that Justin, our reviewer, needs to participate in. Justin would have been notified that he needs to participate in this review. Now that notification can occur via email as well as an RSS feed. In addition to that, the client actually has an action items section which would also notify the participant that he needs to do something with a particular review. We're going to take a look at our Subversion review. When I click on the review, I see the same information that Bob saw a moment ago. We can see that we are currently in the inspection state and all of our general information. One of the nice features about the tool is in the upper right hand corner we can see this reject option. This is actually a feature that allows us to reject a review if the specific information has not been provided. In some cases, it's important for companies to have stringent policies for the review, such as annotating files before the review is sent out to its reviewers. And since those files have not been annotated in our particular case, I could technically reject this review, stating that they need to go back and annotate their files. However, we're not going to do that today. As we scroll down, we can see our participant information. There are a couple nice features about the participant section. One, I can sort the individual columns, or I can actually change my group by settings. Also, you can use an email or a poke option, and you can do this globally to everyone that's participating in the review, or you can do it to an individual. The difference between the two is quite simple. Email is a mail to link that allows me to customize the message I send out to an individual, and it actually opens up my native email client. The poke option is actually a pre-defined or canned message that is sent out and configured within the tool. As we scroll down, we also see our defect information, some general chat information, and of course our review materials. Now as the reviewer, there's a couple of things that I can do. I can change my view as if I prefer an overlay or a separate view. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of those files. When I click on the file, it opens up in a diff view window that allows me to see the information that's contained within that source file. Over on the left is where we would enter in our comments or chat information about the particular file, and this is how we would actually perform the review. Notice that we can specify an overall comment here within the tool. I could say something like, "I really like this," and add it to the review. Now again, this is an overall statement that is not specific to anything within the actual source code, but is specific to this file. The other thing that I can do is make comments on individual lines. And so if I were to highlight this line, notice that it says start conversation at line 14. So let's do that now. And notice that line 14 now has a comment associated to it. The other unique thing that I can do within the tool is create defects. I can click on a line and begin to type a conversation. I can also include a defect here, since this is something that I want the author to address. I can give it a label, select a severity, and a type. Now severity and type are custom fields within the tool. I can customize these to meet my needs. I could add items to this list, I could remove items to this list, or I can actually remove the field altogether. We'll go ahead and set our type and add and include a defect. It's important to note that the term defect is a customizable term within the tool. So if I would prefer to have this labeled as issue or finding, I can easily change that within the administrative settings area. The term defect within CodeCollaborator is only within the context of this review. You are able to create defects in a bug tracking utility with CodeCollaborator, but by default this is not configured. It is only, again, a reference to a bug or a defect within the context of this review. Basically, it's something that we want the author to address before we would close this review out. Now, we cannot close a review unless the defects have been addressed, and those defects can either be addressed by being fixed or move the item outside of or track externally of the tool. You can track defects externally in your bug tracking utility with CodeCollaborator. We can edit this defect, and we can choose the Track Externally option. The Track Externally option allows us to create a bug in our bug tracker by clicking on a link. Now, if I were to click on this link, it'll open up my bug tracking utility, which happens to be Bugzilla. But this link will support any bug tracking utility as long as it has a web front end. The other thing that I can do is specify an external name. So let's suppose that this particular defect had been found some time ago and is really outside of the context of this review, and we don't anticipate that the author is going to address it. So in this case, we would track the bug externally, and since the bug already exists in our bug tracking utility, we could enter in its bug number. So let's say it's bug number 2. And when we click on Track Externally, notice that now the bug has been tracked externally. We have the defect ID associated to it and a link. Notice that the link will take me over to bug number 2 in my bug tracking utility, which happens to be Bugzilla. The other thing that's important about this is that our bug icon has gone from red to green with an arrow. Now this arrow indicates that the defect has been moved outside of the context of the review. And now again, I would actually be able to close this review because I don't have any open defects. Since we want to walk through a review start to finish and see how the author could address the issues and then reassign the review back out to the reviewers, let's go ahead and reopen this particular issue. And now that our defect is no longer being tracked externally, we're ready to move on. We can go to Previous Files, or we can click Next. CodeCollaborator allows us to review other types of artifacts even though those artifacts are not source code. So as we can see, we have this PDF file, and just like before, we can make overall statements or create individual comments or defects within the actual PDF. Now the way that we do this is by placing a push pin on the document. Notice that when I click, it places a push pin, and we can see the label is next to white paper. Now you'll also see here that on page 1 at these particular coordinates is where I would be starting my conversation. And I can add that. Now notice that I could also include the defect here as well. So just like we did with our source code, we can still track defects within other types of artifacts. And this is true of not only PDFs, but images. Now the other nice feature that we offer is a print to review driver. You can actually install this driver, and on any file that you could print to review. And you could open a new review or attach the file to an existing review. Now this is great if we want to attach a Word document, Excel spreadsheet, schematic, or any other type of file that we might want to print to a review. Once we have reviewed all of our files within the review, we can click Done. This takes us back to our review materials page where we can see the comments and notes that have been added. If we scroll down, we can see that we have a next steps. We can wait to approve code changes, or we can approve the review as is and be notified when certain actions occur. So let's go ahead and approve, since as the reviewer we're finished. And now we are going to a rework phase. Notice that the author is going to go and fix or address the defects. So we've sent this back over to the author so that he can not only review the comments and statements that we've made, but also address the files. So let's return to the author's perspective of this review. We are now looking at Bob's browser instance. We can see that it's in the rework state. And if we were to scroll down to the defect area, we'd notice that we have a defect here on line 49. And if we scroll down into the review materials section, we'll also see that same information. And this is if we were to use the browser interface. Now I'd also like to take a moment to open up this particular review in Eclipse. CodeCollaborator offers an Eclipse plugin. That plugin creates a CodeCollaborator perspective, which we can see here. We see the title of our review, who our participants are, and as we scroll down, we can also see our review materials. Notice that just like within the web browser, I'm seeing all of those comments that have been added to the particular files here within the review materials section. And also, in the moving on section, I can see what my next step would be, which would be to choose defects fixed, proceed to verification. Now, since we've not actually fixed the file at this point, we won't do that. Let's open up what the review looks like within the context of the Eclipse IDE. I'll choose the overall statement. and we can see all of the comments that were made against this particular file. If we were to click on one of these items, it would highlight and move us down to the appropriate line. If I choose line 14, it shows me that, and again line 49, it'll automatically skip me there. And I can also see that same bug icon that we saw a few minutes ago within the web browser. So all of these comments are highlighted in yellow, and this indicates to me, the author, that I've not read any of these comments. And so let's go ahead and do that now. We'll mark each one of these as being read. Now the other thing I can do is respond to any one of these comments. Now we're going to take a moment to show a side-by-side comparison of the author in Eclipse and the reviewer within the browser. On the left we have the author's Eclipse view, and on the right we have the reviewer's web browser view. A few moments ago, Bob responded, "Thanks. My screen, as Justin, has automatically been updated to see that comment." If I were to respond again, my screen has now marked that comment as being read, and notice what happens over on the Eclipse side. That message is automatically sent to Bob. This allows us to interact as if we're having an instant message type of conversation back and forth, allowing us to work through the review rather quickly. However, if we're not logged in at the same time, maybe because of time zone differences, or maybe I've gone out to lunch or gone home for the day, the next time I log into this particular review, I'll see all of those messages, and anything that I had not read will be in yellow, like a news group, and so that way I can pick up right where I left off. Now let's return to our author, Bob's Eclipse view. Bob notices that on line 49 there's a defect that he needs to address, and he can see that he needs to change K++ to K+ equals 2. And so we'll go ahead and do that now. We'll return to our Java perspective, open our file, and we'll make changes to that file. Let's make a couple of changes. I'll copy and paste to speed this up. Once I've modified the primeutils.java file, I'll save it. From here, I could right-click on the package, go to the team area, and click on Add to Review. The other option is just to choose the file individually. Now, instead of creating a new review, what I want to do is actually attach this to the existing review. Again, we'll click Next. Notice that the file has been modified, and since this is the last thing we need to do for this particular file, is we're just going to click Finish. This now lets us or notifies us that we can move over to our CodeCollaborator perspective, which we'll do. We'll scroll down, choose Defects Fixed, and we'll proceed to verification. Now, at this point, the author has finished everything that he needs to do. And now we want to return the review to the reviewer. Now the reviewer is going to be notified just like before, through RSS, email, or using the CodeCollaborator client's action view. Here we can see the Subversion review has been returned. Let's open the review. I can scroll down to the Review Materials section, choose the primeutils.java file, and see the differences that occurred within that file and the changes that were made by the author. We can actually see here all of the information and the changes that have occurred within the context of this review. We can again choose or click on the individual lines and it'll bounce us down to the appropriate place. The line numbers have actually changed. Notice that on the left-hand side, our original file that had been checked in is here, and this comment or defect had been posted against line 49. But on the right-hand side, our most current proposed changes, the line is actually within line 46. And a CodeCollaborator is smart enough to pick up on that change and the differences and make the line number changes appropriately. We can see that the author changed K++ to K+ equals 2, which is what the reviewer, Justin, had requested that he do. So since that item or defect has been addressed, it is my responsibility as the reviewer to mark this fixed. And once the defect is fixed, I can mark this review as being done. Before we do that, let's take a moment to talk about some of the features that are available here within the diff viewer. Under the Options section, I could change my diff view from side by side to over under, and this is true for any of the participants within the review, and I'll show you what that over under view looks like. The other thing that I can do is choose my compare option. Any files that have been attached to this review, I could choose to compare them and choose which side those items should show up on. And so if I had 15 different files or revisions, I would be able to choose the appropriate revisions within the context of this review. Since there's nothing else that I need to do, I'll go ahead and choose Done. And then within the Next Step sections, as the reviewer, I'm going to go ahead and choose Approve. And if I were to scroll up to the top, we'll notice that this review has now been marked completed. Let's now take some time to talk about the reporting capabilities of CodeCollaborator. Let's navigate to the Reports section. and we'll notice that there's a series of default reports made available here within the tool. We can see review detail type of reports, both brief summary and detail. We'll choose the detailed report, and let's enter in a review ID. We'll run this report, and notice that we have information here in the overview section, such as the review name, who the creator was, and how much time was spent on that review. We have total person time, total reviewer time, and wall clock time. If we were to scroll down, we can see details about each one of those times and who participated and how much time they spent. We also see our defect log, our materials summary, such as our inspection rate, as well as defect density information here within the context of the review. Review material additional detail. And as we continue to scroll down, we see all of the comments that were made within this review. This is great for auditing purposes. If we scroll back up and return to our reports section, we'll take a look at some of the other customizable reports that are made available within the tool. Let's take a look at recently completed reviews. We now have columns that we can choose from. So if I wanted to add open defect count or observer information or even lines of code information, I can choose the appropriate column with the tick mark. As I scroll down, I can choose filters. So if I want to filter by group or the review title, phase information, the author, anything that I might want to filter by is all available here, including custom fields, which we talked about at the beginning. Notice that product version area field is available here as well. But let's go ahead and run this report, and when we run it, we get all of our results back in a tabular format. Notice that we can also take this report to CSV, we could print it, we can also create a link, which is great if I want to save it in as a bookmark or reference it in another third-party utility. The other option that I can use is the SQL option. If I were to choose the SQL query and open this up, notice that it provides the SQL query that was used to generate this report. You'll actually notice that the database schema is published within the help documentation for CodeCollaborator, which you can access in the upper right-hand corner of your portal. This documentation helps you to set up a third-party reporting tool to query the database and get out all of the information that you might need if you want to go above and beyond the reports that are offered here within the tool. We should also take a moment to talk about some of the administrative features within the tool. Within the admin area, you'll find all kinds of configurable items for the tool. And over on the left-hand side, you'll see your navigation pane and then all of the information that's made available. We talked about how you could customize the term defect, and this is where you would change that. As we scroll down, we'll find access restriction information, and that includes everything from preventing people from seeing reports or participating in reviews. As we scroll down further, we see review process options, and even details about bug tracking, integration, and external clients. There are a ton of configurable options within the tool, everything from creating groups to version control information, setting up and configuring your custom fields. We have review custom fields, participant custom fields, and defect custom fields. And you'll notice that if I were to choose the custom field type and take a look at this, you'll see all of those selectable items that we saw a few moments ago. And this is where I would be able to go in and delete those items, add to this list, or delete the field altogether. You'll actually find ways to modify roles within the tool as well. We have a formal inspection role as well as a standard role. If we were to edit the standard role, we can see all of the different ways that we can configure this role. And this is a very important section of the utility because it completely determines the workflow of the review as far as who's allowed to mark defects as fixed and who's actually allowed to even go in and mark a review as being finished. As we continue to take a look at the different administrative items, you'll notice that we can set up review templates or set up notification templates or even customize those automatic links which reference the bug tracking utility, and we saw that earlier using Bugzilla. That concludes the overview of CodeCollaborator 7.0. CodeCollaborator reduces review times and can eliminate meetings, allowing people to perform reviews when it is convenient for them. It also provides an audit trail and review metrics needed for process improvement and compliance reporting. With CodeCollaborator, reviews actually get done. People don't have to give up in frustration because it's too difficult to coordinate, capture, and track details. CodeCollaborator makes it simple and easy. For more information about CodeCollaborator or any other SmartBear products, please visit www.smartbear.com. Thanks for watching.